In the gospel text of today, which is taken from the Gospel of Mark, chapter 12, verses 18 to 27, we will be introduced to a religious group that existed at the time of Jesus, named the Sadducees. The Sadducees were a group which held as their scripture only the first 5 books of the Old Testament, called the Pentateuch or the Torah. These were Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, and Deuteronomy. They alleged that in these books there did not seem to be any mention of the resurrection from the dead, and so therefore they did not believe in the resurrection because it was not contained in their scriptures. They came to Jesus in order to ridicule belief in the resurrection, and so they pose a question to him. And the question is this, that there was a man who married a woman, and they lived as husband and wife, but they had no children. The man died. The woman remained a widow, but the man had 6 other brothers. Deuteronomy states very clearly that if a man dies and leaves no children, the brother is obliged to take the brother's widow as his wife. And so the second brother took his brother's widow as his wife and had no children, and he died. And the next took her as his wife, and he died. And the fourth took her as his wife, and he died, until all 7 had the woman as their wife, leaving no children, and all died and went to heaven, and the woman dies. And so the Sadducees turned to Jesus with a smile on their faces possibly, and asked Jesus, in the resurrection, whose wife will this woman be? Because all 7 brothers married her. And Jesus responds to them on 2 levels. The first level is he speaks about heaven and the resurrection as a different state of being. When we plant a seed into the ground, we get not a seed which comes up from the ground, but a tree. Now the tree is different from the seed. And we realize that the seed has died in the ground and has given life to something which is extraordinary, to something which is new. The same thing with our external bodies. It is true that there will be a continuity between this body and the body that we will receive from the Lord in the resurrection. But it is also true that in the resurrection, we will have a different kind of body. And because we have a different kind of body, there will be a different kind of relationship. There will be no being given in marriage and taken in marriage. And so, the question of whose wife will she be does not arise, because there will be no giving and taking. The second objection which Jesus raises is from the scriptures themselves, which they accepted as their own. He goes to Exodus, and even though he does not quote the text, he quotes that place in which Moses approaches the burning bush, which we know is Exodus chapter 3. And as Moses approaches the burning bush and God tells him not to come closer, God reveals himself as God of Abraham and Isaac and Jacob. God reveals himself to Moses as the God of his ancestors, as the God of the patriarch. And God would not reveal himself as their God if they were not alive with him. And because they are alive with him, because they live with him, that is why God can reveal himself to Moses as a God of those who live, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. And so Jesus turns to them by quoting from Exodus, a book which they would accept as their scripture, and says to them that God is not a God of the dead, but a God of the living. Whether they were convinced is another story. Whether you are convinced is what matters now.